In this video, we'll show you how to replace the high pressure fuel pump on your Ford Edge. This is located in the front of the vehicle and right on top of the engine. Let's get started. With the vehicle raised and supported, we can remove the lug nuts using a 21mm socket. And we can remove the wheel. Looking from the back side of the vehicle above the rear subframe. On the driver's side, we find a gray electrical connector on a black box connected to the chassis. We need to unplug that. On the bottom side of the connector, we find a tab. We need to press in on that tab while we pull out on the connector. I'm going to use a couple of flathead screwdrivers for this. It's hard to get your hand in the space. With our fuel pump module unplugged in the rear of the vehicle, we can go ahead and hop in the car and start the engine. You're going to go ahead and let it run until it dies out and then try to start it again. If it dies out that second time, you're all set. To remove the engine cover, you can simply pop it up. It's good to do the front first and then the back. We can just set that off to the side. In order to get the battery to slide out, we need to remove the airbox. First, we can go ahead and remove our electrical connector. You always want to check the terminals for any damage or corrosion. You can use either a 7mm or a flathead screwdriver to loosen up the hose clamp. Moving inward on the intake, we can loosen up the second hose clamp. We can remove this stud using a 13mm. There's a small rubber hose connected to the intake. And just pull that off. On the driver's side of the airbox, we have two tabs. We can simply pop those out. And grab onto the intake grommet or boot here. We can remove the upper portion of the box. And grab onto the edge of the filter and go ahead and remove that. Quick inspection of that before we set it off to the side. Now we can take our intake tube, pop it off the inner portion. Pop the other end off of the box. And now we can kind of just fold this forward and out of the way. And two more 7mm bolts up here at the top of the inlet. There's a few grommets on the bottom of the box. Pop those out and pull the box out. We have an 8mm holding in our tie down here. Go ahead and remove the bracket. In order to slide our battery forward, we need to remove this ground strap. And normally, this ground strap would be connected to a stud off the strut tower here. Looks like that broke, so ours is right here. Normally, this would be an 11mm. Ours is a 13. Just slide that off, set it down. Then we can pick up on the battery. You're going to be careful as you lift it over the bit of the wiring harness in the front. Looking towards the back side of the battery, we can go ahead and remove the 10mm holding the negative cable on. You just need to loosen that up. You can shimmy the cable back and forth until the terminal comes off the battery. And set it off to the side. On the driver's side of the engine bay, towards the back side, we find this insulation piece here. Right in the middle is an electrical connector. We'll go ahead and pinch in on the tab on the back side and we'll pull up. You always want to check your terminals for any damage or corrosion. That looks okay. And then we can go ahead and remove the insulation. Looking towards the back side of our fuel pump, we find a quick disconnect back here. I'm going to use one of my trim tools. You can certainly use a flathead screwdriver. I'm going to be very careful not to damage the quick connect. I'm just going to pop the quick connect back just a little bit. Once that's pushed out, you can disconnect the connection. Just in front of that quick connect, we have a 17 millimeter fitting here. Get a rag under there to catch any of the fuel. Looking towards the back side of the fuel pump once again, on the driver's side, we find a 10 millimeter bolt holding this bracket on. We'll go ahead and remove that. We have another 10 millimeter bolt holding that bracket on right behind the pump here. Go ahead and lift up on the bracket, and we'll set that back and off to the side. We have two 8 millimeter bolts holding on our high pressure fuel pump. You don't want to fully remove one of these before the other. You want to just loosen one of them and then loosen the other one a little bit, and then we're going to go back and forth and slowly work the pump upwards. So we'll just give the first one a few turns and go on to the other one. Give the other one a few turns, and we'll go back and forth until both bolts are fully loosened. We can go ahead and remove the pump. I'm going to clean up the upper mating surface here. You don't want to spray any solvents inside here because that will go into the engine. I'm going to spray some brake parts cleaner on a rag and then wipe down the top surface. I'm going to wipe away from the hole. That way any dust or debris doesn't fall down into the engine. Now we can go ahead and pull the tappet out of the hole. You want to give your tappet a good inspection and make sure there's not excessive scoring. This looks okay. In order to get to the crank pulley, in order to turn the motor over, we need to remove at least the front portion of the fender liner. Starting out underneath on the front portion of the fender liner here, we have two 5.5 millimeter screws. Moving up and into the fender here, we're going to remove these other 6 5.5 millimeter screws as well. There should be 2 more on the inner part of the fender, but it looks like we're missing those. With all our screws removed, you can go ahead and grab onto the fender liner, and we're just going to tuck it behind the rotor. Now looking in the passenger front wheel well, we find the crank pulley on the front of the engine. We're going to use the pulley bolt itself with a 21 millimeter socket. We're going to turn this clockwise. You want to occasionally check into the fuel pump's mounting hole and make sure that the camshaft is at bottom dead center. That means flat to the hole. You'll be able to tell it's like that because you'll be looking at the flat face of the cam, just like that. We get our screws back into the fender liner. On one side of our tappet, we have a small tab that sticks out. On the other side, it is flat. We want to have the part that sticks out facing towards the front of the vehicle. As we start to lower that down in, you'll feel it line up. And you can push it all the way down. And we can line up each tab with its bolt hole and start to get the fuel pump down into place. It's not going to quite set all the way down. It should just be a little bit off. And then we can get the bolts in and that'll suck it down. Before I get the first one all the way down, I'm going to switch to the other one and get it down to the same point. Now we can torque each of these to 44 inch-pounds. And now we need to turn the bolt an additional 55 degrees. We can get our bracket back into place. It's good to get both of the bracket bolts started in before you tighten them down. After getting both of them threaded in, I'm going to tighten this one down, and we can do the same with the other one. We can get our hard line fitting started on, and we'll snug that down. We go ahead and push on our quick connect fitting. Make sure it snaps in and not going to pull back off. Once both of those are on, we can go ahead and remove a rag. We'll get the insulation back over the high pressure fuel pump, and we'll get the electrical connector plugged back in. Make sure that's locked down and it won't pull back out. Next we can get the negative terminal on. We can snug that down. Doesn't need to be too tight. Just enough that the terminal doesn't move. Now we can just slide the battery back into place, again being cautious of the bit of wiring harness in front of the battery. We'll get the ground strap over to the strut tower back on. We can go ahead and snug this down. We can get our battery tie-down bracket back in place. We can tighten down the battery hold down. And make sure that the battery isn't going to move. We have two grommets down here in the engine bay in front of the battery. Go ahead and line up the studs on the bottom of the airbox with those. Next we can get our bolts back into our intake duct. We'll snug each of those down. Get the air filter back in. We'll get the upper portion of the intake box in. We'll get this part into the boot. You'll need to angle the upper portion of the box, slide the tabs in. Then we can close down the clips. We can get the electrical connector plugged back in. Make sure that bottoms out and is locked in. Get the vacuum line on. We'll get the studs started in. We'll snug that down. We can tighten down each of the hose clamps. Line up the grommets and press down on the engine cover. We can get the fuel pump module plugged back in. You gotta make sure that it clicks in and is locked and not gonna pull back out. We can get the wheel installed on the hub. I like to push in on the bottom of the wheel. We get the first lug nut threaded in all the way. We can get the rest of the lug nuts on. Now we can snug these down in a star pattern. With the vehicle on the ground, we can torque our lug nuts to 162 foot-pounds in a star pattern. Now inside the vehicle, we can go ahead and press the engine start-stop button. You don't want to put your foot on the brake though here, as they would try to start the engine. All we want to do is prime the pump a handful of times. I'm simply going to press the engine start-stop button. Let everything turn on, and then we'll press it again. We'll do that a few times, then we can try to start the vehicle. Once you've primed the pump, go ahead and put your foot on the brake and start the vehicle. Take it for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.